100 and differ by exactly 6? Okay, I believe the answer to that is 47 and 53. Question 2. From a pile of 22 matches, players alternately take 1, 2, or 3, and whoever takes the last match wins. Should the first or second player win? All right, let's think about this. Should the first or second player win? All right, let's think. I think the second player wins. All right. Question 3. A price rises 40% and then falls 30%. What percentage of the original price is it now? All right, so you do your P times 1.4 and then multiply that by 0.7, so 1.4 times 0.7, which is 0.98. So it's 98% of the original price. Question 4. How many positive divisors does the number 120 have? Okay, so we can count them in pairs. So we have 1 and 120, 2 and 60, 3 and 40, 4 and 30, 5 and 24, 6 and 20. Then, see now, 8 and 15, and then 10 and 12. All right, so that's 8 pairs, which amounts to 16 divisors, 16 positive divisors. Hello. Question 5. In how many distinct ways can 6 people be seated around a circular table? 6 people being seated around a circular table. Okay, so for 6 people, if you want to permute them, then that would be 6 factorial, which is 720. But they are being seated around a circular table, so every possible arrangement has 6 that look the same as it. So I think that the answer is 720 divided by 6, which is 120. But I'm not sure about that. Question 6. Which is greater, 2 to the 50th power or 3 to the 30th power? All right, let's think about this. Hello. So 2 to the 10th power is approximately 1000. So 2 to the 50th power will be roughly 1 quadrillion. Now, let's think. 3 to the power of 10 is roughly 60,000. So 3 to the power of 30 would be 216,000 billion, which is 216 trillion, which, so the answer is 2 to the power of 50. Okay. Question 7. What is the longest straight rod that fits inside a box measuring 2 by 3 by 6? All right, so you have to visualize a cuboid, like an Amazon package, which is 2 units high, 3 units wide, and 6 units long. And then you have to apply the three-dimensional Pythagorean theorem. So you have to do 2 squared add 3 squared add 6 squared, which is 4 add 9 adds 36. And 4 add 9 add 36 is 49. And then you have to take the square root of that, which is 7. So it would be 7 units long. Hello. Question 8. How many edges does an octahedron have? An octahedron is 8 equilateral triangles fastened together into a three-dimensional shape, three-dimensional solid rather. And if you visualize it, you will see 4 edges on the top, 4 edges on the bottom, and 4 edges around, the total being 12. Question 9. What is the remainder when 2 to the 40th power is divided by 7? All right, so to answer this, we have to consider the powers of 2 divided by 7 and what the remainders are. The powers of 2 go 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc., etc. And when you divide these by 7 and consider the remainder, you get 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, etc., etc. So that's in a cycle of 3, and it's asking about 2 to the 40th power. So 2 to the power of 39 divided by 7 will give you a remainder of 1, and 2 to the 40th power divided by 7 will give you a remainder of 2. Question 10. What is the smallest positive integer with exactly 7 divisors? Now, we know that the square numbers have an odd number of divisors. It is those numbers which do. 1 has 1 divisor, 4 has 3 divisors, 9 has 3 divisors, and so on. So, if we think about this, who must it be? 16 has 5 divisors, 25 has 3, 36 goes 1, 2, 3, 4. It has 9 divisors. 49 has 3, 64, 1, 2, 4. The answer is 64. 64 has 7 divisors, and they are 1 and 64, 2 and 32, 4 and 16, and then the number 8. Okay, question 11. In how many ways can 4 people be chosen from 9? How many ways can 4 people be chosen from 9? So that's the choice function, which is 9 choose 4. And the way that you calculate that is you do 9 factorial over 5 factorial multiplied by 4 factorial. That's on the denominator. So it would be 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 all divided by 24. So that's 9 times 8 times 7, all divided by 4. So that's 9 times 2 times 7, which is 18 times 7. And 18 times 7 is 126. Hello. Question 12. What is the sum of all whole numbers from 26 to 75? Okay, what we can do is we can figure out the sum of all the numbers going up to 75 and then take away the sum of all the numbers going up to 25. So, what is the sum of all the numbers going up to 75? It's going to be 75 squared at 75 and then divide that by 2. 75 squared is 5625. 5625 plus 75 is 5700. 5700 divided by 2 is 2850. Okay, so we have to remember 2850, and then the sum of the numbers going up to 25. Well, that's 25 squared at 25 divided by 2. So that's going to be 650 divided by 2, which is 325. So 2850 to take away 325 is 2525. So 2525. Hello, how are you doing? Question 13. A polyhedron has 10 faces and 16 vertices. How many edges does it have? Okay, 10 faces and 16 vertices. Alright, so what we need for this is we need Euler's formula, but I've forgotten it. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and remember it. So it relates the number of vertices, V, and the number of edges, E, and the number of faces, F, to each other using the number 2. So for a cube, the number of vertices is 8, and the number of edges is 12, and the number of faces is 6, so 8, 12, and 6. So I think that it goes 8 plus 6, take away 12, gives you 2. So that would be V plus F, take away E, gives you 2. So I think that the answer is 16 plus 10, take away E gives you 2, so 26 take away E gives you 2, so E must be 24, I think. But I don't know. I think that the number of edges is 24. Question 14. What is the greatest number of pieces you can cut a pancake into with 4 straight cuts? 4 straight cuts. So, I think that the answer is 15. Question 15. What is 19 multiplied by 21? So what you do is you do 20 times 20, which is 400, and then you take away 1, so you get 399. Question 16. What is the greatest common divisor of 84 and 132? Okay, so the answer to that would be... Alright, let's think. What's the answer to that? It's So you get 42 and 66, then you get 21 and 33, and then you get 7 and 11. So I think that it's 2 times 2 times 3, so I think it's 12. I think it's 12. Question 17. What is the probability of at least one head in 5 flips of a fair coin? The probability of at least one head in 5 flips of a fair coin. So that's like asking what is not the probability of getting no heads in 5 flips of a fair coin. And so the answer to that is 31 out of 32, because there's only one possibility of getting 5 tails in a row. Question 18. How many subsets does a set of 7 elements have? Alright, so a set of n elements has 2 to the power of n subsets. And so for 7 elements, it would be 2 to the power of 7, which is 128. Question 19. How many integers from 1 to 100 are divisible by 4 or by 6? Okay, so by 4 or by 6. And we're going to include 100 in this. So there are 25 that are divisible by 4, and there are 16 that are divisible by 6. So you could naively add those together and get 40. Sorry, pardon me, you would get 41. However, notice that the numbers 24, 48, 72, and 96 would be double counted. They would be double counted. So we actually have to do 21 plus 4 plus 12. So 21 plus 4 plus 12, which is 37. Question 20. What is 35 squared? The answer is 1,225. Question 21. What is the sum of the first 8 prime numbers? So the first 8 prime numbers are 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, and 19. So we add up the first 5 and we get 28. And then we add up the last 3. So we get 49. So 49 add 28 is 77, I think. All right. Question 22. What is the length of the space diagonal of a cube with edge 3? So we're going to do 3-dimensional Pythagoras. So we do 3 squared multiplied by 3 and then square root it. And 3 squared times 3 is 27, and the square root of 27 is 3 times the square root of 3, which is, roughly speaking, 3 times 1.732, which is 5.196, roughly speaking. Question 23. One item in 100 is defective. The test catches every defective one, but also flags 5% of good ones. Roughly what percent of flagged items are actually defective? Okay, so let's see. Well, I'm not sure. It seems like 20%, but I'm not sure. Question 24. What is the probability that two fair dice total 4 or less? Okay, so the answer to this is, let's think. So we have 1 and 3, 2 and 2, or 3 and 1. So it goes 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, and then a 2. So that brings the total to 6 out of 36, which is 1 out of 6. Question 25. How many distinct arrangements are there of the letters in the word success? Okay, so the word success has 7 letters. So it would appear to be 7 factorial arrangements or permutations, but then you have to divide it by the repeats. So it would be 7 factorial over 2 factorial times 3 factorial. So it would be 7 factorial over 12 and 7 factorial over 12. All right, let's consider what that would be. So 7 factorial is 5040. And so 5040 divided by 12 will be the same as 2520 divided by 6, which will be the same as 420. Question 26. Hello. Question 26. On a 2x4 grid of city blocks, how many shortest routes join opposite corners? A 2x4 grid. All right, so let's count. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How to count this? Just a second now. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 on the top. Yes, I'm just counting something. All right, so it's going to be 4 combinations of pressing the right and 2 combinations of pressing up. So it's however many arrangements there are of four copies of the word right and 2 copies of the word up. So it would be 6 factorial over 4 factorial over 2 factorial. So it would be 720 over 48. 6 times 5. So it would be 2 times 5. So I think it would be 3 times 5, which is 15. Okay, so question 27. Rearrange the letters of the word granite to make someone who shows no gratitude. The answer to this is ingrate. Question 28. In a 30, 60, 90 triangle whose shortest side is 4, how long is the hypotenuse? Okay. So in a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the answer to that well, let's see now. So if the hypotenuse is 1, then sine of 30 degrees is a half. So the opposite side would be a half. And cosine of 30 degrees is root 3 over 2. Times everything by 2, so then we get 2 on the hypotenuse, 1 on the opposite side, and root 3 on the adjacent side. But in this case, the shortest side is 4. So it would be 2 times 4 for the hypotenuse, which is 8. Question 29. What is each interior angle of a regular decagon? So a regular decagon has interior angles which add up to 8 multiplied by 180, which is 1440, and then you have to divide that by 10, so you get 144 degrees. Question 30. What is the probability of drawing 2 hearts in a row from a shuffled deck without replacement? Okay, so drawing the first heart would be 1 out of 4, and drawing the second heart would be 12 out of 51. So it's 12 out of 51 multiplied by 1 out of 4, which is going to be 3 out of 51, which is going to be 1 out of 17. Question 31. What is the sum of 1/3 plus 1/9 plus 1... Hold on, just turned off. What is the sum of 1/3 plus 1/9 plus 1/27 continued forever? Okay, so let's see. Now, in base 3, this would be 0.111 forever and ever. So, what does that represent? Well, what that represents is that represents 1/2. That represents 1/2. Question 32. What is the median of the following numbers? 4, 9, 1, 16, and 200. So we have to put them in order. So it would go 1, 4, 9, 16, 200. And the middle number out of 1, 4, 9, 16, and 200 is 9. Question 33. What is the recurring decimal 0.444 ... as a fraction? So 0.4 recurring is 4/9. Question 34. One tap fills a bath in 12 minutes, and another tap fills the bath in 24 minutes. What fraction is full after 4 minutes with both running? Okay, so first of all, let's think about this. So the first tap fills the bath at a rate of 1/5 of a bath. No, rather. Right, let's think about this. So it fills the bath at a rate of 5 baths per hour, and the second tap fills the bath at a rate of 2.5 baths per hour. So if you add 5 and 2.5, you get 7.5. So 7.5 baths per hour. And what you need to think is, what happens if you fill it only for 1/15 of an hour? What fraction of the bath is full? Alright, so 7.5 times 1/15, basically. Now 7.5 is 15/2. And 15/2 times 1/15 is 1/2. So actually you end up filling half of a bath. Question 35. How many squares does the bishop in the corner of an empty chessboard attack? So an empty chessboard has 8 diagonal squares, but the bishop is occupying one of them, the corner square, and therefore it can attack 7 potential squares, I believe. Question 36. A test score at the 84th percentile is roughly how many standard deviations above the mean? Alright, so what's the answer to that? Well, the answer to that is something like 16% of people are better, and the standard deviation rule goes something like, alright, so how does it go? I forget the exact numbers. It's something like 63, 90, 99. So it's something like that. So I think it's between 1 and 2 standard deviations, but I have to check. Question, well, I mean, why not just let's actually just look this up now so that we can actually confirm this. Hello, hi. All right, so we're just looking up the standard deviation rule. All right, so the numbers I'm trying to recall are 68, 95, 99.7. 68, 95, 99.7. 68, 95, 99.7. Now, 84th percentile means, well, it would mean 16 on both sides. So, yes, so actually this person is 1 standard deviation above the mean. Going by the 68, 95, 99.7 rule. Question 37. Exceptionally tall fathers tend to have sons shorter than themselves. What is this statistical phenomenon called? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Question 38. Ice cream sales and drownings rise and fall together. What third factor most plausibly drives both? Well, simply the weather, the sunshine, because people tend to be out and swimming and visiting the beach as at the time when they get ice creams, and they're more likely to drown during those times. Question 39. A risk falls from 4 in 1,000 to 3 in 1,000. What is the relative risk reduction? Okay, so I would have thought that the risk was reduced by 25%, but I can't be sure. Question 40. A family has 2 children, and the elder is a girl. What is the probability that both are girls? Okay, so what's the answer to this question? Well, I would have thought that the answer would be 1 and 2. Yes, I think the answer is 1 and 2. But I could be wrong. Question 41. A fair die plays out its face value in pounds. What is the fair price for one roll? I think that it would be the expected value of rolling a fair die, which is 3.5, and therefore the answer is £3.50. Hello. Question 42. A roulette wheel with no zeros has landed red 6 times running. What is the probability the next spin is red? Okay, so I don't know what the structure of a roulette wheel is exactly. I think that half of the outcomes are black and half of the outcomes are red, in which case the answer would be 1 and 2, but I need to actually check the structure of a roulette wheel. Question 43. Among 30 random people, roughly what is the percentage chance that 2 share a birthday? Okay, so that relies on a piece of trivia called the birthday paradox, which I have not looked into, but I will have to look into it later on. Question 44. If no A or B is true, is the statement some A or B true or false or undetermined or undetermined? Okay, so we are told that no A or B. So it's something like saying no apples or bananas. So now think about the statement some apples or bananas. Well, that's obviously false. That has to be false. Question 45. What is the contrapositive of this statement? If it is a fish, it has gills. Now, I believe the contrapositive is if it does not have gills, then it is not a fish. but we have to look up that word contrapositive to be sure. So we're going to look that up right now. We're going to look it up right now. Okay, that's correct. That's correct. Question 46. Of two islanders, Anne says, at least one of us two is a knave. So what is Ben? Now remember that knights always tell the truth and knaves always lie. And there are two islanders, and Anne says, at least one of us two is a knave. So, if Anne is telling the truth, i.e. if she is a knight, then it's totally fine, and she's saying that Ben is a knave. But if Anne is not telling the truth, then what's the opposite to at least one of us two is a knave? What's the opposite to that? It would be none of us are knaves, which cannot be true, because we've hypothesized that Anne is a knave, and so we would contradict ourselves. And so Anne must be a knight, and so Ben must be a knave. Question 47. To test the statement, beer drinkers must be over 18, which two do you check? First, a beer drinker. Second, a cola drinker. Third, a 25-year-old. And fourth, a 16-year-old. Okay, so you would have to check the beer drinker and the 16-year-old. You must check the beer drinker's age, and you must check that the 16-year-old is not drinking. That's how you would do it. No, I'm not going to jump. Your name is Amara Syed. Question 48. If all P are Q and no Q are R, what follows about P and R? Alright, so all P are Q, so we visualize P being a subset of Q. And then it says no Q are R, so we visualize R being disjoint from that set Q. And what follows is that no P are R. Question 49. Is being a square a necessary or sufficient condition for being a rectangle? Being a square is a sufficient condition for being a rectangle, because every single square is a rectangle. But it is not a necessary condition, because how would you account for rectangles that are not squares? Question 50. What is the exact negation of the statement, every student passed? The exact negation of that would be at least one student did not pass. Question 51. A capital letter N rotated 90 degrees clockwise resembles which letter? The answer would be the capital letter Z, if you think about it. All right, so let's go. Question 52. A mirror shows a clock reading 40 minutes past 2. So what is the actual time? All right, so it reads 40 minutes past 2. So the actual time would be, well, you have to account for the fact that the hour hand would be past the 2. Right, so it would actually be between the 9th and the 10th hour. So it would actually be 9:20, if you think about it. Question 53. A painted cube cut into 125 small cubes yields how many with exactly one painted face? All right, so on each of the 6 faces of the cube, we can clearly visualize 9 cubes that have exactly one painted face. And so the answer would be 9 times 6, which is 54. Question 54. What is the maximum number of sides a flat slice through a cube can have? Okay, let's see. So I think that they are asking something like chopping off part of the cube. So I think the minimum would be 3, and I think that the maximum would be 6, because I can visualize that you can make a hexagon by cutting it in a correct way. Question 55. What is the only solid that looks like a circle from every direction? Well, the answer would be a sphere. Question 56. A wheel of radius 1 meter rolls through 1 full revolution. How far does its center travel? Now we have to be careful about this. All right. So the formula for the circumference of a wheel is circumference is equal to 2 pi times the radius. So 2 pi times 1, which is 2 pi, which is around 6.28. And then we have to visualize a sort of tape going around the wheel, and that would trace the tip of the tape. So it would be around 6.28 meters. Question 57. What is the angle between a clock's hands at exactly 20 minutes past 7? Okay, so at 7, now the sort of like naive answer would be to consider the angle between the 4 and the 7 on a clock. And that would be 3 times 30, which is 90 degrees. But you have to consider that the hour hand has advanced within the hour, so it would be an extra 10 degrees, so it would be a 100 degrees. Question 58. To the nearest minute, when do a clock's hands overlap between 1 and 2? For example, between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. Okay, so let's think about this. So it would seem to be between, let's see now, our intuition says something like 7 minutes past 1, something like that. But we have to answer it clearer. All right, so let's think about this. So all right, so every single minute the hour hand advances by half a degree. So we have X number of minutes. So at 1:05, the hour hand would be 2.5 degrees in its advancement. Wouldn't it? But it would miss it. All right, so we're just going to think about that question at a later date. Right, question 59. A meeting starts at 11:50 and lasts 145 minutes. So when does the meeting end? Okay, so the answer to that question is how much time is 145 minutes? And the answer to that is 2 hours and 25 minutes. So that would take us to 2 hours and 15 minutes. So 2:15 p.m. Question 60. A boat doing 12 miles per hour in still water rides a 3 mile per hour current. How long to travel 45 miles downstream? So because it's riding the current and not riding against the current or opposing the current, it's traveling at 15 miles per hour. And so to travel 45 miles, that would take 3 hours. Question 61. One worker finishes a job in 4 hours and another in 12 hours. How long do they take when working together? So if we assume that it's a parallelizable task, which can be done by both of them at the same time, like painting a wall, then the first worker is working at a rate of 1/4 of a job per hour, and the second worker is working at a rate of 1/12 of a job per hour. And so 1/4 plus 1/12 is the same as 3/12 plus 1/12, which is 4/12, which is 1/3 of a job an hour. And therefore it would take them 3 hours to finish a whole job together, which makes sense because it's less than 4 and it's less than 12, of course. Question 62. You drive out at 30 miles per hour and return the same route at 60 miles per hour. So what is your average speed? Okay, so let's pretend that the entire journey from your starting point to your destination is 30 miles, because the logic applies with whatever distance you choose, but let's pretend that it's 30 miles. Then it would take you 1 hour going outwards and then half an hour coming back. So that would be 1.5 hours for the whole journey, 1.5 hours to cover 60 miles. 1.5 hours to cover 60 miles. So 60 divided by 1.5, the answer to that would be 40. 40. So the average speed is 40 miles per hour. Question 63. Doubling a car's speed multiplies its kinetic energy by what factor? Alright, so the kinetic energy of something is half mv squared. And so if you double the car's speed, which in this case we'll take to be velocity, that would be half of m multiplied by the square of 2v. So in other words, the kinetic energy would multiply by 4. Question 64. At the very top of its flight, what is the acceleration of a ball thrown straight up? The acceleration of a ball thrown straight up. Okay, so it would be the same as it is throughout the whole journey, which is the strength of the local gravitational field. And if we take downwards to be negative by convention, then it would be negative 9.8 meters per second squared. Question 65. A helium balloon floats inside a car turning left. Which way does it lean? So it would seem to lean towards the back of the car, but I'm not actually sure about that. I have to investigate. Question 66. Does sound travel faster in water or in air? So famously, sound travels faster in water. Roughly 5 times faster, if I recall correctly. Question 67. Which weighs more? 1 liter of ice or 1 liter of liquid water? Now, the answer should be 1 liter of liquid water, because it is denser than ice. And the way in which you can know this is you can take a liter container of water and fill it up to the 1 liter mark and put it in your freezer, and then the ice will occupy more volume than the water when it becomes its frozen version. And also pipes burst in the winter and so forth. Question 68. When the moon is full, where does it sit in the sky relative to the sun? Okay, so well, it would be facing the sun in such a way that we can see it. But I'm not actually sure what they're asking. Okay, question 69. At 8% compound interest, roughly how many years does it take for the money to double? So you would have to multiply by 1.08 over and over again until you get 2. Until you get 2. Okay, so how to work this out? Well, we know for sure that it has to be less than 12 years, because that would be simple interest and not compound interest. But I don't know the actual rule for approximating this mentally. Question 70. What number increased by 15% gives 138? So x multiplied by 1.15 gives 138. So we have to do 138 divided by 1.15 to get the real answer. And what is the answer to that? Well, 1.15, or rather 115, is 5 times 23, and 138 is 23 multiplied by 6. Okay, so all right, so that would be 6 over 5. Okay, so it appears to be the number 120. Question 71. If a number divided by 3 minus 4 equals 8, what is that number? So what you would have to do is reverse the steps. So you'd have to do 8 plus 4, which is 12, and then times that by 3 to get 36. Question 72. Two numbers sum to 13 and multiply to give 40. What is the larger one? So the answer would be 8, because the numbers in question are obviously the numbers 5 and 8, because they sum to 13 and they multiply to give 40. Question 73. A mother is 3 times her daughter's age and in 15 years will be twice her daughter's age. How old is the mother right now? So the daughter's age can be D, and the mother's age can be 3D, and then D plus 15. Let's see. That's right now. So 3D plus 15 is equal to 2D. So the daughter's age should be 15. And the mother's age should be 45. And that makes sense. So the mother is currently 45 years old. Question 74. A two-digit number's digits sum to 9 and reversing them adds to 27. So what is the number in question? All right, so it's obviously not 45 and 54. So next we go to 36 and 63, and that should be the answer, and it is. So the actual number is 36. That's the answer to that question. Question 75. How many digits does 2 to the 20th power have? So 2 to the 20th power is 1,048,576, and that has 7 digits. Question 76. What is the units digits of 7 to the 35th power? So we have to consider the powers of 7 and consider the cycle of the unit digits. So the powers of 7 go 749, 343, 2401, and then they repeat in the units position. So it goes 7931, 7931, and they're asking for the 35th power of 7. So that would be 3. The answer would be 3, because on the 36th power, it would end in a 1. And the cycle goes 7, 9, 3, 1. So the answer to this question is 3. Question 77. What is the sum of the proper divisors of the number 12? The proper divisors of 12 are those divisors which exclude 1 and 12, I believe. So it should be the sum of 2 and 3 and 4 and 6. And that would be 15. That would be 15. Question 78. What base 10 number does the binary number 110101 represent? So you have to add together 1, 4, 16, and 32. 1, 4, 16, and 32. And the answer to that is 53. Question 79. What is the logarithm of 81 to base 3? So what power of 3 gives you 81? The answer is 4. Question 80. Each term is the sum of the previous two, and the sequence begins 4, 7, 11, 18, 29. And so what comes next? The answer would be 18 plus 29, which is 47, which is 47. Question 81. What number comes next in the sequence 5, 8, 14, 23, 35? So you can see upon inspecting the differences that we get 3, 6, 3, 6, 9, 12. 3, 6, 9, 12. So the next difference going up in the 3 times table should be 15, and so the next number should be 50 in the sequence. Question 82. What number comes next in the alternating sequence 40, 20, 60, 30, 90? So if it's an alternating sequence, we see that, what do we see? Well, I think the answer is simply 40. Question 83, what letter comes next in ROY, GBI? The answer would be V, because V is for violet. Hello, greetings. Question 84. Which letter comes exactly 5 places before the letter T in the alphabet? Well, the letter T is the 20th letter of the alphabet, and the 15th letter of the alphabet is O. Question 85. What is the only common English word ending in the letters M, T? The answer would be dreamt, which is the past tense of dream. Question 86. Which word meaning permitted is a homophone of allowed? It would be the word allowed. A-L-L-O-W-E-D. Question 87. Rearrange the letters of the word cautioned to name what schools provide. So those letters rearranged to give you the word education. Question 88. Spell the word algorithm backwards and say the third letter of the result. So spelling algorithm backwards is M-H-T-I-R-O-G-L-A. And the third letter of the result is T. Question 89. Arrange the letters of the word planet alphabetically and find the fourth letter. Okay, so the word planet, P-L-A-N-E-T, when the letters are arranged alphabetically, it should go A, E, L, N, P, T. A, E, L, N, P, T. And the fourth one was N. Question 90. How many times does the letter E appear in the word perseverance? So we spell perseverance and we get P-E-R-S-E-V-E-R-A-N-C-E. How many times does the letter E appear? I believe it appears 4 times. Question 91. How many distinct meanings does I saw the man with the telescope have? So it has at least 2 meanings. The first meaning being that you saw a man who was carrying a telescope, and the second meaning being that you saw a man using your own telescope. And then there are more humorous meanings when you use the word saw, as in applying that metallic toothed instrument, which is kind of gruesome. Question 92. Cartographer is to maps, as horologist is to what? I believe that the answer is clocks. Question 93. Which does not belong in the following set? Copper, iron, brass, gold, silver. So I think that the answer is brass. No, this is not pre-recorded. I'm live. I think that the answer is brass because the others are pure elements. Copper, iron, brass, gold, silver. Okay, so question 94. Which is larger, the number of minutes in a year or 1 million? Now, the number of minutes in a year. Let's consider that. So that should be... So how many minutes are there in a year? That would be 60 times 24 times 365, something like that. But we know that there are 8,760 hours in a year, and then you could multiply that by 60 and compare it to 1 million. That would be 87,600 times 6, but that's obviously going to be less than 1 million. So the answer is 1 million. Question 95. A stack of 1 million coins, each 3 millimeters thick, hello, stands roughly how many kilometers tall? Okay, they are 3 millimeters thick, so that would be 3 million millimeters in total, and that would be 3,000 meters, which is 3 kilometers. Question 96. What is the probability of drawing a red king from a standard deck of cards? Okay, so there are 2 red kings. There's the king of hearts and the king of diamonds. So it is 2 out of 52, which is 1 out of 26. 1 out of 26. Question 97. If 15 people each shake hands with every other person exactly once, how many handshakes occur? So I think this is looking at the triangle numbers again, I think it's the 14th triangle number, and my justification for this is that the 15th person has to shake hands with the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and so on, all the way up to the 14th person. And then the 14th person has to shake hands with the first person, the second person, the third person, all the way up to the 13th person. And this pattern continues. And so the 14th triangle number is 14 squared plus 14, all of that divided by 2, which is 210 divided by 2, which is 105. Question 98. How many cards must you draw from a standard deck to guarantee 2 of the same suits? Now you want to guarantee 2 of the same suit. Alright, so you draw, you have to think of the worst case scenario where the deck of cards is somehow conspiring against you. So that would be the situation where for some reason you draw all of the hearts. No, hold on a second now. Hold on, let's just think. 2 of the same suit to guarantee that. Alright, so the answer would simply be 5. Because in the worst case scenario, you draw suit type 1, suit type 2, suit type 3, suit type 4, and they're all distinct. And then upon drawing the 5th card, it has to match one of the suits that you have so far, and thus the answer is 5. Question 99. A coin flipped 4 times lands heads 3 times. Does this prove the coin is biased? No, it does not. No, it does not. Because that's a possibility. Question 100. How many rectangles of any size can be found in an 8x8 chessboard? How many rectangles of any size? Okay. So, what's the answer to this? Well, I don't know. It seems like kind of an extensive calculation, really. Well, I don't think that they're asking, like, how many ways can you position them, just how many rectangles of any size can you get. Okay, so that's a lot simpler. So, what would that be? So the rectangle would have to, we're going to consider 7 by 1 to be exactly the same as 1 by 7. So what's the answer to that question then? Alright, so it would be 64 minus 8, and then divide that answer by 2. So 64 minus 8 is 56, and 56 divided by 2 is 28. So I think the answer is 28. Alright, that completes it.